Well, the world has changed, and we now live in a world where you can get the answer to any question anywhere within a second. But it's up to you to determine whether that's good information or slightly bad information or misinformation or disinformation. And that's a radical change in the way things have been done for thousands of years. I really started thinking about this when my daughter came of age at about the same time search engines started coming of age. This was long before Google. They were called InfoSeek and AltaVista, and she started writing papers using them. And I realized that and told her that when you get a book out of the library, you might disagree with the book, but you can be certain there was an author and an editor and a publisher and probably a fact checker and a librarian who were all gatekeepers to make sure that authoritative information came your way, and people pretty much trusted what they read in books. Don't believe everything you read in the newspaper, but for the most part, if you find it in a card catalog in a library, that's authoritative. Now you can put a term into a search engine and get a wealth of information, some of which is badly wrong. And in several spheres of our lives, in the political sphere where our liberties are at stake, in the medical sphere where people Google their symptoms, your lives are at stake, and in scholarship, the kind of things that you do in college, things are done differently these days, and it's all happened so quickly. The education in how to find good information has lagged behind the tools for creating massive flows of information and enabling us to search for them. So that's where crap detection comes in. I think it's both impractical to the point of impossible to police the quality of information that people put online, and it's inadvisable to try. We wouldn't have the web if there were any rules about the information that you put online. So we're trading this freedom to publish for uncertainty about authority. And as far as I can tell, the best answer is in educating ourselves to have better internal tools, literally to use tools to check things out, but also to develop a much finer sense, as journalists and police detectives do of how to investigate everything on your own.
You said in the beginning of that, you were talking about your daughter and the advent of search engines. I know that one of the things you make a point of is that the first place to use crap detection is with a search engine. That's a good place to start. Why don't you talk a little bit about how you approach that?
Well, so I started with sitting down with my daughter when she was, I guess, about 12 years old, 11 or 12 years old, and I knew a couple of sites to test. And so I said, search for Martin Luther King. And to this day, which is 16 years later, if you search on Martin Luther King, the third or fourth site from the top on every search engine is martinlutherking.org. And it looks like a site about the civil rights leader. And if you click through it, you'll see it's got articles about the civil rights leader. And if you read those articles, they paint a pretty dark picture of Martin Luther King Jr. And the natural question that my daughter asked was, how can I tell how real this is? And I said, well, let's look for an author. We did find authors for one of the articles and looked him up using a search engine to find out what others had to say about him. And that was a big clue. There was no listed author for the site. They have since changed that, and they've come out from behind their cloak. This is what's known as a cloaked site. I showed her how to use Whois, an internet utility, free, available to anyone, that enables you to see who is the registered owner of a website. They can still fake that a little bit, but It turned out that an organization called Stormfront.org was the registered owner, and then a search on Stormfront.org reveals that it's a white nationalist community. So here's a site about a black civil rights leader by a white nationalist community. You can fairly well assume that it is more propagandistic than historical, but more important is that process of recursively searching, looking at the page as a crime scene and you're investigating it, or it's a story that you as a reporter are looking into, you can't really make any assumptions until you've done some investigation. And we have powerful tools for doing that. The, the search engines of choice are powerful methods for digging in, for looking at what people's sources are and who else cites those sources. And if you're looking at medical history, there are a number of tools that you can use. There's something called the Health on the Net Foundation that publishes a browser add-on that will tell you whether they've got information about a site that makes medical claims. There's the Medical Library Association has published a user's guide for finding and evaluating health information on the web, and this is literally life and death. There are many instances. I just came across one myself in which an informed patient in touch with communities of informed patients can be way ahead of their doctors and could save your life. And there's some information out there that's quackery under different names, and it could threaten your life. So knowing a few tools is really important. If you're trying to evaluate some kind of truth claim that rests its authority on some professor or scholar somewhere, you could use Google Scholar, or you could download a free software called Publish or Perish that aggregates information from Google Scholar and other sources and offers a score of that scholar, that scientist's academic credibility. So more and more we're seeing tools that can help. The tools are free. It starts with a search engine and and goes to some of these more specialized tools. Of course, there's Snopes. When you get the email from your mother-in-law about the little boy in England who's got a brain tumor and wants you to send him a postcard, please look it up on Snopes, because something like 100,000 tons of postcards have been sent to this tiny post office in England. There really was a little boy with a brain tumor. He doesn't have a brain tumor anymore. He's not a little boy. He doesn't live there. And that poor town, the postmaster there, is inundated because this urban legend keeps circulating. And then there are the more scurrilous ones you get in the mail about political figures. Some of these are just easy to check. They're known to be urban hoaxes. So I send a link to the Snopes entry about a hoax to people who circulate them.
It's certainly one of the things I'm recommending. Part of what we're getting at here, and I think you implied it in what you talked about with medical information, the more important the information is to you personally, the more that rides on it, the more you have personally at stake, the more you need to go deeper yourself. But we don't have time on everything to go deep. We don't, and we can't, even if we wanted to. I can't jump on a plane today and go re-report the BBC's Afghanistan story. There's limits. So, can we talk a little bit about this tension and balance between where we need to go deep ourselves and ask questions, and where and how we find our own trusted sources to tell us things that we can more than not believe?
Well, of course, that's traditionally been the role of the journalist, is that we trust the journalist to go out and do the legwork and do the fact checking and give us the story. Now, of course, the publications that employ journalists are no longer the monopolies they used to be, and we all roll our own sources, and we get many sources. And I recommend that people create a personal learning network that includes people they trust on different subjects. So, I would trust Ethan Zuckerman on rumors coming out of Africa. He's a guy who's wholly devoted to knowing what's going on in Africa or not. There are people I would trust about science and technology, people I would trust about what's coming out of the White House. I think you need to do what good journalists always do, which is to develop a network of trusted sources. And fortunately, these days, you don't have to get on the phone, you don't have to make claims on their time. So many of them have blogs or Twitter feeds. You can include those feeds in your personal learning network and have at your disposal a network of sources who you can take a look at, if not directly query
Mhm.
about things. That's, I think, getting a little far afield, but I think when you cultivate a personal learning network, you need to feed information to people before you engage them, and engage them before you ask things of them. Again, journalists know that about cultivating sources. So I think a mixture of good reference materials like factcheck.org and health on the net, and knowledgeable people
Right.
who you can pay attention to are essential. I think, however, the first tool, when you're trying to decide how much time am I going to spend on this, is this life and death or is this a bar bet, is the way Clay Shirky has put it, is that you need to consciously think about the process for a while. You don't want to spend the rest of your life evaluating every click you make on the web.
Right.
But I recommend starting by thinking critically about the material that's shown to you, and develop a sense for it. And when you develop a sense for it, you know that there's something fishy, and you may have to dig deeper to find out what it is. But the way claims are stated, the way a website is designed, the way authority is claimed, the kinds of sources that are cited, you can tell at a glance whether something might be worth looking into more
Right.
deeply.
We, you and I have spent a long time thinking about these things, and I wonder sometimes whether we're um, maybe, if anything, a little bit too immersed in this whole thing. Whether normal people don't have time for this. And it's a question that comes up a lot. People say, "Well, yeah, I know I should, but who has the time for this?" And I'm circling back to what we just discussed, but the um, how are we to settle on, or should we settle, maybe is a better question, on certain journalists or other sources, um, and shouldn't we be maintaining some skepticism even about them?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think you need to recursively apply your I don't know whether it's skepticism or just a critical thinking,
Mhm.
um, to sources that you may trust. But of course, as you said, we don't have infinite time. Who does have time and who should have time are students, and maybe I should say even school children. Uh, that's when you're supposed to be learning the tools you need to be an effective citizen and to succeed in society. Let's set aside for the moment the political problem involved with introducing critical thinking in schools, because there is a large segment of America and the world who don't want their children being taught to think for themselves. Those children who want to survive and thrive in the future, they're going to have to learn to think for themselves. If they just accept authorities, they are going to be slammed,
Right.
uh, without a doubt, in every sphere of their lives. The things that I've been talking about, they're not rocket science. It's not even as hard as learning the multiplication tables. It just takes a little bit of exposure and a little bit of practice, but we've got a combination of fear of the internet keeps the internet out of schools with young children, and teachers have a hard enough time trying to make a living, keep up with the political demands of testing without becoming experts on every new technology. So I think a small amount of time and money spent educating teachers about educating students about how to do these things for themselves would have an enormous effect, not only on the number of people who aren't taken in, but on the general credibility of the information commons. You know, I don't think that there's any top down way to improve the quality of information, but the bottom up way, as happened when the printing press happened, is to increase the literacy of the people who consume it.
I, I, I agree. This is a demand problem at least as much as a supply problem. Before I let you go, I see behind you a stack of books. Or is that a book of yours that I'm seeing a stack of there?
Well, here's one I pulled off for our conversation. So
Aha.
this is the new one, and I guess I can kind of manipulate the camera. But if you look in the corner there, that top shelf in the corner
Hmm.
where the ladder is, those are all my books.
Yeah. I,
So I wanted to be a writer of books. I became a writer of books. I'm kind of tired of writing books. There's so many other ways to get written communication out these days. But I felt that this book was really necessary because there are a set of skills around. I call them literacies, and I distinguish literacies from skills in the sense that if you have the skill to ride a bicycle and you have the only bicycle in the world, you can still get from place to place faster. If you have the skill to read and write, it doesn't do you much good if you're the only one who has the skill to read and write, and or put a link on a web page. So these skills are all social skills that have to do with not only the ability to code and decode in the media, whether it's video or posting on Reddit or um, subscribing to a blog, they are skills that have to do with doing things together with others and
yeah.
successfully in concert. And I'm very excited about it. The web is terribly exciting because people have used the technical affordances to do all kinds of useful things together that benefit us. They benefit us so much we've even forgotten. Gee, we can put. I can put a video up. You can put this video up in a few seconds, and millions of people in the world can see it, and it doesn't cost us uh, anything other than access to the network and digital media. All I could go on. All of these things are assumptions in our world.
Right.
How to use these things is now, I think, the critical uncertainty. Is life going to be better, or is life going to be more driven, more distracted, more full of flim flam? I think the answer has to lie in who knows what, and that's why I wrote the book. I mean, I think that's why you're a journalist, and it's why I started writing books in the first place. Is in that we live in a very rapidly changing world, and people need to get well framed information about it, not just the information, but the perspective and the context and the points of view. The need for journalism is not just not going away, it's really expanding. We need many more people who can contextualize that information for us.
Well, Howard, it's really nice of you to join me, and on behalf of all of the students, thank you for doing this, and we'll see you again soon. I hope in person again one of these days. Take care of yourself.
My great pleasure, Dan.
All right. Bye bye.